Welcome back to
Something
Ominous. This is your host, Jessica.
And I'm Karina.
And this is episode 18.
It was funny because last time you said 17. No, last time you said 18. And then we had to edit that part out.
I know.
Because it was episode 17.
But we're finally back. We had to take a long break because we had a death in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to spend some time with our family after that. We did the novenario. And then during that, my dad ended up in the hospital for a couple of days. So yeah, but we're finally back.
Yeah, it's been a lot. But I also feel like it was a much needed family time. We needed to just be there.
Yeah, we did.
But yeah, we are back and we're glad to be back.
So to stay up to date, make sure you follow us on social media because we did post that we were going to be back. Follow us on Instagram at Something Ominous Podcast.
TikTok at Something Ominous.
And then YouTube is Something Ominous. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll start. Gary.
Yeah? What? Why are you looking at me like that? I'm scared. Every time you give me that look when you're about to start, I'm like, oh God.
What the hell? No. You got new neighbors moving in. Right?
Yeah.
And then they move in and you hear random noises in your house. You see flickering lights, like not actual lights, but you see like floating lights coming in and out.
Like orbs? No. Was that orbs?
It's like a floating light.
Okay.
It's not orbs, but it's just like a light. It's a light. You know it's a light, but it's not a lamp. It's not actual light bulbs. You just see a light. It's bright and then it turns off. These odd occurrences had Gottliebin Dittus neighbors questioning what was going on downstairs, only to later find out that there was a possible demonic possession happening.
Dude, do we need to be praying the Salmo?
No, we'll be fine.
Okay.
This case is considered to be the most extreme demonic possession in history. This is the demonic possession of Gottliebin Dittus. So this case is from Germany, and her name, I Googled it. And I YouTubed how to pronounce it. And I feel like I sound like the person that was pronouncing it. And if I don't, I am very sorry. But I do feel like I sound just like them. So Gottliebin was one of 5 children. She had 2 brothers, the eldest named Andreas, who became the village counselor. And then there was Hans, who was half blind. 2 sisters named Karina and Anna Marie. The children were orphaned at a young age when both parents died. In 1840, a little after the passing of their parents, the Dittuses moved into their new worn-out apartment in the outskirts of Mottlingen in Germany. Now, there was nothing new about this apartment. It seemed to be like the basement of a house. They had their neighbors upstairs, so they lived downstairs. And as we can imagine, they all had to work here and there to make a living and make enough money to buy food and pay for their apartment. They say that the family were devout Christians, especially the parents, before they passed. And there's really not much about the family like after the parents' death, but like what I gathered from here was that the kids did struggle to live a normal life. They also don't give the ages of the brothers. They just say this one was the oldest. And then I think Gottliebin was the youngest because they really don't talk about the ages. They kind of just put the order of each sibling.
Okay.
So I assume Andreas, which was the oldest, and Gottliebin was the youngest in the order that the article had them listed. Most articles have them in that order. So I'm assuming she was the youngest. Okay. They say at a young age, Gottliebin was constantly getting sick, forcing her to leave the jobs she would get. Because of all the illnesses she had throughout the years, it wasn't alarming to the brothers and sisters when one day, out of the blue, Gottliebin falls to the floor while Andreas was giving grace following the move to their new place. What occurred next terrified the siblings and upset the family that was living upstairs. The siblings recall that Andreas was giving grace, and at the moment he said, "Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest," Gottliebin falls. A few seconds later, they hear recurring banging and shuffles coming from the bedroom, living room, and kitchen. Just imagine, like, you're living upstairs and you hear all that shit. I'll be like, man, these fucking new neighbors, what the heck? Like, ya van a ser ruidosos. Following this event, they say her behavior started to change. She was once liked and respected, and now was avoided and disliked by the people in the town. After the fainting, the siblings said the noises got worse inside the apartment. They all tried to avoid it. Gottliebin herself would walk a good distance weekly to attend sermons by Pastor Johann Christoph Blumhardt. I personally think that she felt she needed help. That's why she was making these daily walks to church.
And you said she was attending like service and everything.
Yeah, she started like
she was
they were
going
ignoring
inside the church.
Yeah, they were ignoring the like everything that was going on. But I feel like deep down, she knew something was wrong with her because she started making these long walks to church. And after attending church one day, Gottliebin built up the courage to talk to Blumhardt. She went to confess and confessed several things from her past. Doesn't say what. Like it doesn't give you a full detail of what she confessed, but she thought that maybe confessing would relieve her from what was going on at home. And like I said, she didn't reveal much because she didn't fully trust the pastor yet, but she did confess that she suffered from nightly temptations. I don't know what they mean by that. The pastor was limited on what he could do for her since he didn't have much information on what was going on with her. One day, Gottliebin falls ill from a dangerous facial infection, causing her to be bedridden with care of medical doctors. Blumhardt pays her a visit to pray for her, just to make sure she's doing well and all that. And he was instantly annoyed or bothered by her behavior towards him. He said that in every visit, she would look at one side every time she'd see him, kind of avoiding him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like turn away from him.
Yeah, which was weird because she was going to church and he was the pastor for the church.
Yeah.
But when she'd had that one-on-one time with him, she'd turn away. She would do some weird stuff like laying in bed with her arms folded close to her chest. So like this, like a kind of like an X. And the minute he would start praying, she would unfold her arms and stretch them out open like this. When I think about it, I'm like, that kind of looks like a cross or a T when you're laying down. Now, that may not sound like a big deal, but Pastor Blumhardt was bothered by it and felt like it was somewhat disrespectful because before and after his visits, she acted normal. So it was only when he would come around, she would act weird. He said he felt she was self-willed, self-righteous, and a spiritual proud person. So he started to avoid her. After 2 years of activity and their sister's strange behavior, the Dittus siblings were tired and went looking for Pastor Blumhardt for help. They couldn't deal with the noises around the house. The banging and knockings were starting to get so loud that neighbors around town were able to hear them in their home. They say like from miles down. They were so loud that from miles down, they were able to hear them.
Dude, what the heck?
Yeah, and the town is so small. Everything else is like land.
Oh.
So they were so loud.
So the houses all like kind of close together?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're close together. Gottliebin then started to have apparitions. She mentioned seeing a woman who had died 2 years prior, standing at the foot of her bed holding a baby, staring at her while she slept. She said this woman would often walk towards her and talk to her, telling her, "I want to be left alone." Or, "Give me paper and I won't come back."
Paper?
Yeah. I thought that was weird. But I guess you'll see later on.
Okay.
Where this kind of connected. I was like, oh, well, maybe that's why she wanted paper. The siblings said they would see shimmers of lights in the bedroom, and others visiting witnessed this as well. I'd be like really scared if I'm laying down and I see an apparition of a woman with a baby.
Yeah, dude, an apparition is so different from like hearing sounds.
Yeah.
If I had to, I mean, I wouldn't choose anything, but if I had to choose like a knocking on a door, a slamming of a door versus seeing like an apparition that talks to you with holding a baby.
Yeah, me too. I would take the noise and moving stuff.
Like poltergeist type stuff?
Yeah, over seeing. I don't know. I just feel like seeing a ghost or having an apparition, it is much scarier. Well, Blumhardt had a change of heart after the visit from the siblings. He started to make daily stops at their house to see how Gottliebin was doing. One day, they find a piece of paper under the bed of Gottliebin completely covered in soot. Because of the soot, they weren't able to read what was written on the paper. Next to the paper, there were coins wrapped in paper that were also covered in soot. A couple of weeks later, they see a flickering light on the floor behind the stove. Catching their attention, they investigate, and what they find was shocking and scary. Buried under the area where the stove was, they found salt, chalk, bones, and coins all wrapped in paper. They assumed that these were used for a black magic ritual. The pastor burnt them, hoping this would help the activity and strange behaviors around the house. But this did not help. The sounds of heavy footsteps were now heard and never stopped, even during the day. They say they got worse when Gottliebin was all alone in the house and the tables around her would start shaking violently. So I guess before they didn't hear footsteps, they only heard bangings, and then they started hearing like men footsteps. The pastor arranged for an investigation in the house just to make sure the siblings weren't lying and making things up, and to also get a better understanding. So this is around the time where spiritualism was starting to grow and people didn't really understand it. Even now, I feel we don't understand much of it, but we're a little bit more open about it. And the pastor was never there when the noises and shaking of the table happened. He was only there when they found the stuff for black magic. But up until that point, he didn't experience any of the noises. So he was kind of like skeptical about it. On one of the investigation days, Pastor Blumhardt entered the living room and hears 2 knockings coming from the bedroom where Gottliebin was staying. So he finally hears something. The knocks were followed by heavy bangs coming from the same direction. He starts praying, hoping that this would stop the noises. But in that moment, the windows in the room start to rattle. The chairs around Gottliebin leap from the floor and sand starts coming down from the ceiling. And I also don't think it was sand, because the houses are built how they're built in Mexico. Mm-hmm. So I think it was cement. So I think like with all the shaking, like little particles of the cement started falling down with the possession, I guess, or the haunting or whatever it was. They removed the floorboards to try and find the source of the bangs and discover other occult objects buried under the house. They find scraps of paper, mysterious powders, small packages of money, and a pot which contained small bones mixed with mud. Dude, also I was thinking, like, why are you tearing up this house? What? I mean, I guess because it was 1840, but why would you tear up a house thinking that there's something underneath causing it to shake and you hear footsteps around and bangings on the wall?
Do you think he had like suspicion about them doing witchcraft or something?
He kind of didn't believe them for sure. He was kind of like, oh, they didn't take them serious. That's the problem because they were so young. Throughout all this, it seemed like she was still attending church and going to church wasn't affecting her. But she was still very standoffish with the pastor. The next day, after attending church, Gottliebin was found unconscious on her bed. They found her with the skin of her head and arms glowing red, and she showed signs of suffocation. I don't know what they mean by glowing red, but I feel like maybe they were red. Not glowing, but... red.
I envision her like glowing light.
Me too. But every article describes it glowing red. So I'm like, what do they mean by
just
glowing
like bright red?
Probably.
From being suffocated.
Yeah, probably like a bright red. So they get the doctor over to the house in hopes of bringing her back. And as much as he tried, he wasn't successful. After half an hour, Gottliebin just comes back on her own.
After she had died?
Yeah, after she was being unconscious, they couldn't bring her back and she just comes back on her own. Wow. With a trembling voice, she whispered to the pastor that she's seen the dead woman again when she returned from church. According to her, the woman was waiting in the living room with her dead child in her arms and her dark presence made her faint. Pastor Blumhardt gets Gottliebin to move out of the house. He's like, all right, you know what? It's the house. Let's get you to a new house. He believed that this may calm everything down, thinking that the house was the issue and not her. There were a lot of rumors going around town, and he just kind of wanted everything to simmer down too. They hired police officers to keep guard and protect the house so no one around town could break in. There was a lot of curious people wanting to experience what was happening in this house, and were even asking to spend the night because they wanted to have that experience themselves.
What the heck?
Yeah, they were like, can we get... And even a Catholic priest, I read in one of the articles that a Catholic priest wanted to go to the house, spend the night to see what he experienced. Yeah.
That's odd.
I know, right? Like a priest. I would think that they'd just go in and bless it or something.
Yeah. He's like, no, I want to feel.
Yeah, no, he's like, I want to see what's going on. So Gottliebin arrives to the new house the pastor put her in, only for the activity to follow her. Whatever this was angry for the move, or maybe because the pastor was now involved. Because things got worse. She starts to frequently experience what they describe as violent convulsions. They lasted longer in time the more she had them. They describe these convulsions to be so intense that it seemed her head and arms were ripping apart.
Oh my God.
While being unconscious, her arms would twist, her head would turn, and her body would lift up. The doctors that were there to treat her couldn't control her or stop it. After one of her long-hour convulsions, Gottliebin woke up saying she saw something demonic floating in front of her face. The pastor couldn't take it anymore. He was done seeing her suffer, and on one of her attacks, he rushed to her, folding her arms together and starts to pray. He then whispers to her, "Fold your hands and pray." This made her come out of her episode of convulsions and everything stopped. After this, Blumhardt realized that praying over her helped. When he would pray over her, she'd stop having all of these attacks. But on one of her episodes, he noticed that the prayers didn't work. Gottliebin was making faces he's never seen her make before. He felt this rage coming out of her. This demon was getting stronger. I think what was going on is that the demon was playing with them. I personally think that, because every time the demonic presence returned, it returned with more control and more power over her. So anytime they did the prayer, like I feel like he'd let her loose and then he'd come back and attack until they had no control.
Like he kind of pretended it was working or something.
Yeah, until he was probably like, all right, that's enough. He said that for the first time, she was trying to attack him. Gottliebin's eyes roll back and she starts chanting in a demonic voice. Blumhardt's prayers no longer worked. They believe Gottliebin's body was hosting 14 demons that were being led by the ghost of the woman with the child she would see at the foot of her bed in her old apartment. They later find out that this woman was murdered. She also killed 2 of her children and buried them in the field. It doesn't say who killed her. It just says that she was murdered. And it doesn't say why she was murdered, but I'm assuming she was murdered because she killed 2 kids.
So she killed her kids and she was murdered. Okay.
Yes.
She was probably killed by like the townspeople or something.
Probably. They didn't go much into detail with her, but they just said that that's what they found out. This woman also practiced dark magic, which condemned her to a restless afterlife. And this is why she was constantly appearing to Gottliebin, because the woman was bound to the devil. She wanted someone to suffer with her and use Gottliebin. Over time, the darkness that this ghost attached to Gottliebin got stronger. She went from having 14 demonic entities to 1,067.
What?
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, what the fuck? I didn't realize there was so many demons out there.
Yeah. What? That's crazy.
So the pastor noticed wounds on her one day and realized that she was hurting herself. They found her with a bleeding nose, wounds on her chest, and even chunks of hair pulled out of her scalp. She was woken up one night by pain on her neck. When she opened her eyes, she found a burning hand choking her. The hand magically disappeared, leaving behind liquid-filled blisters which took more than 2 weeks to heal. Her body would get so swollen, they said, extraordinarily swollen with water, that she would vomit buckets of water. Dude, this girl suffered a lot.
I'm surprised she's even alive right now.
Yeah, I think it was just the demons. They found her in a huge puddle of blood laying in bed because she started to suffer from hemorrhages that they believe came from an attack by a spirit-like figure. She was done. She couldn't take it anymore and tried to end her life. But the entities that lived in her body didn't allow it. And I think that's why she wasn't dying.
Oh, they were like keeping her alive.
They were keeping her alive, yeah.
Man, that's so sad.
Because they were using her like as a host or, you know, they were living within her. The pastor worked day and night, successfully getting rid of multiple demons every day. Gottliebin started to vomit strange things from small pieces of glass and progressed to small pieces of iron, later vomiting nails grouped together. She was also vomiting pins, wires, and knitting needles. They say that even small living animals like bats and frogs.
What the heck?
Dude, I know. And all of this is recorded. Because at first I was kind of like, okay, like I know I like paranormal stuff, but is this true? They had an interview with him. Like there's like an interview recorded out there.
With a pastor?
Yeah. And he recalls all of this. The demonic entity started to possess her sister Karina and her brother Hans. While possessed, Karina shouted in rage that she would cut Blumhardt into 1,000 pieces. She was being so violent that they had no choice but to restrain her, but she started shaking and moving her body back and forth so hard, just like her sister, that it appeared as if she was trying to tear her body apart. After 2 years of the horrific demonic possession, Gottliebin and her family were completely freed from this possession. Once the possession was over, Gottliebin confessed that she was exposed to magic at a young age when her family was trying to cure an illness she had. Her cousin, who wasn't a good person, practiced black magic, somehow pledged Gottliebin's soul to the devil, and that's why she was always getting sick as a child. This could have been the start of her possession, or maybe this made the possession easier in the house. She probably had something attached already, and arriving to that house made it easy for her to be a victim.
Yeah.
And I'm ending this with a quote from an interview Blumhardt had when this all happened. He said, "The Dittus family asked if it would be all right to find out more by questioning the apparition. My advice was that Gottliebin should on no account enter into conversations with it. There was no knowing how much might be her self-deception. I was certain, I said, that people can be sucked into bottomless quagmire when they become involved with spiritualism. Gottliebin should pray earnestly and trustingly. Then the whole thing would peter out of its own accord. I shall never forget the fervent prayers for wisdom, strength, and help that those men sent up to God. Together we searched through the Bible, determined not to go any further than Scripture led us. It never entered our minds to perform miracles, but it grieved us deeply to realize how much power the devil still has over humankind. Our heartfelt compassion went out not only to the poor woman whose misery we saw before us, but also to the millions who have turned away from God and become entangled in the secret snares of darkness. We cried to God, asking that at least in this case, He would give us the victory and trample Satan underfoot. And that's it.
So she lived.
She lived.
Wow. I can't like wrap my head around that. Because you know how there's a lot of stories about demon possession where like one demon kills a person, or one or two or three or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
She had 1,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, she lived after throwing up all that stuff and self-injuries.
Yeah.
She lived.
Wow. Poor girl.
That was crazy. And it was in Germany. I don't know how spiritualism was over there, but I know around the 1840s it started, at least here in the United States. But I think being exposed to it at a young age when she would get sick is what made it easy for whatever was living in the house prior to her, attached to her.
Yeah. It's a little sad that like she was trying to go to church.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe she knew what had happened and she was trying to either get rid of it or just get help.
Yeah. And she probably also felt embarrassed to confess and say like, hey, when I was young, one of my cousins did black magic and got sick after that, like even more than she was already sick. So she probably also felt some type of embarrassment
For something that wasn't even her fault.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like she did it.
And you know what? They were thinking that she was the one that was dabbling into black magic. But I think after they did some research on who the woman was, it was a woman that lived there prior to them, like a few years before they moved in. Yeah, see, we're fine. It wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't that bad. It's just sad. I guess it was just sad.
Yeah. It does sound scary, though. I think living it would be scary. But
Yeah,
on
for
paper,
sure.
it doesn't
Or
sound
living
that scary.
around it. Okay, well.
You're next.
So today I'll be talking about the Hell's Gate Bridge located in Oxford, Alabama, which is a funny follow-up from your demon possession. This bridge is called Hell's Gate Bridge. And of course, like the name says, this bridge is very spooky and people even say it's a portal to hell. The bridge was built around the 1930s but was deemed to be in poor condition by 1992. When I looked it up on the maps, I thought it would be in the middle of nowhere, but it's about a half mile away from a big shopping center with a supermarket, so it's not far from the city at all. Like literally it's like behind like their HEB or something like that. So in 2005, the bridge was officially closed to traffic due to its dangerous condition. There's big cement blocks that block the entrances to the bridge, so cars don't attempt to drive through it. They don't even recommend walking through it. That's how bad the condition is. But it's become a tourist spot and a place where a lot of paranormal investigations take place. So as to why this bridge took such a sinister name is another story. People believe that when you walk through the bridge and look back over your shoulder, the road resembles the fiery gates of hell. Now, I actually have a hard time picturing this. I think because I've never thought or envisioned what the gates of hell look like.
I was just going to say that. How do they know what the gates of hell look like?
I don't know, but have you ever watched As Above, So Below?
No.
So
It's a movie?
yeah, it's a movie. So it's about a group that goes into like the catacombs of France. And apparently they go so deep into the earth that they reach hell. So anyway, my point is that whenever I think of hell, that's kind of what I think of. Like just like tunnels underground where just like a bunch of crazy, insane shit happens. And then, wait, spoiler alert. At the end, they go so deep down that they end up coming back up. Like they end up just like opening a little like sewer, what's it called? Like a sewer lid. And they come up just like in the middle of the road.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, it's super creepy. But anyway, that's what I picture. So it was hard to envision what the gates of hell look like. What I'm thinking is that when they turn around, they just envision like a big round fiery portal is what I think it is. The most popular story that I read was that in 1950s, a young couple that was driving through somehow drove off the bridge and died. It said that if you park on the bridge and turn the lights off, you see an uninvited guest in your car. Some people reported even seeing a wet spot on the passenger seat when driving through, as if someone had been sitting there.
Yeah.
And of course, it's also said that they may have had this accident because of the representation of hell that it has.
This was the first recorded accident?
Yeah, because this happened in 1950s. It had just been built like 20 years or so.
Okay, so this is the start of the haunting.
Yeah. pretty much what started people seeing the apparitions or feeling the negativity and everything. And have you ever heard of the term crybaby bridges?
No.
One website called Ghost in My Machine talked about these crybaby bridges. So I'm going to read this little insert from the website. If you park your car in one of these crybaby bridges, the stories go something strange will happen to either you or your vehicle. You might hear a baby crying in the distance or a young mother wailing for her lost child. You might see the glow of a lantern as a ghostly mother searches for her young one. You might even spot footsteps or handprints on the windows, trunk, or hood of your car. Sometimes other actions must be taken beyond simply parking your car in order to inspire the spirits to make themselves known. Scattering baby powder across the hood of your car, for example, or turning off the headlights. So pretty much what they're saying is that this is also one of those crybaby bridges.
Reminds me of the San Antonio.
Yes.
Yeah, with the railroad tracks.
Especially with the baby powder.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but you were with us when we went, right?
No, I didn't go, but you guys did it and you said that you felt it.
Yeah, we felt it. So a little backstory. So if you don't know, in San Antonio, Texas, there's it's a railroad track where you supposedly park your car on one side and you turn off your car. No, you put it in neutral. And then after a few minutes, you start feeling the push of your car that takes you across the train tracks all the way to the other side.
Yeah, and the story behind it is that there was an accident where a train hit a school bus full of kids. So they say that the kids will push your car off so you don't have the accident. I guess like a protection. So you put baby powder and you would see their little handprints on there after.
Yeah. And people have seen that people have said that they've seen the handprints. But, we actually tried it. But I don't know. We weren't really prepared. Like, I think we got like a last minute like bag of flour. And then we threw it on the car, but everything would just slide off. Yeah. Like, it's like you have to probably put water and then put like the baby powder or something. But it wasn't staying on the van. I remember that.
Well, you know what? The van was flat, whereas most cars have that hood.
Oh, that's true.
That would make more sense because if you powder it on the top, then you could see the little fingerprints like with their hands folded pushing the car, whereas the van has a flat back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's true. Because I remember like us throwing the flour powder on it and everything would just slide off and we were like, oh, okay, well, let's just get in and see. But of course there was nothing because there wasn't even like dust on the van. But yeah, that reminded me of it too. So they say that this is one of those crybaby bridges where you can also hear a baby crying or a mother wailing. And there have been paranormal investigations throughout the years, but I didn't find anything significant. One of the videos I watched that I'll link did an EVP session, but the words that were heard weren't really relevant to the question. So they weren't sure if the spirits had a different message or if there wasn't any paranormal activity. So the latest news is that in 2017, the city proposed the demolition of the bridge due to it being abandoned, but nothing was done about it, and the bridge is still there until this day. People still visit. In some articles, it says that it's a tourist spot, but I think it's mainly for groups or people that like to do paranormal investigations. There are signs that say no trespassing and the cement blocks, but a lot of people ignore those. But yeah, that is Hell's Gate Bridge.
So they didn't find anything at the bridge, the investigators?
No, I mean, they would ask things like, did you die here? But they wouldn't hear a response. And then they did go to they actually stood in the bridge, even though they're not supposed to. They stood on the bridge and they said that there was a particular part of the bridge that had a piece of railing missing. It looked super creepy, and the investigators wondered if that was from when the car went over the bridge. And they asked, did you jump off the bridge here? Is there anyone here? They heard the replies firmly and the word costly, which they said, well, they're not really relevant to the questions. But then I'm like, well, if you think about it, they asked, like, did you die here? And then they heard firmly. So it's kind of relevant. I don't know.
I think so. And then it was in the 1950s. I also feel like their lingo back then was different.
Yeah. Or like using the words costly. Like we wouldn't say that, but maybe in that time
they would.
It was appropriate. But yeah, I just thought it was really creepy. And I was really surprised how close it is to the town. I think people just refuse to demolish it because it's still a treasured part of the town.
Especially if they get a lot of tourists.
Like paranormal investigators and everything that go. Yeah, when I looked it up on YouTube, there's a lot of people that go visit it and they take like, you know how now you can have it on your phone, like VIP session. So it's a lot of people that go, and there was a lot of TikToks too of people that would go there and like ask questions.
Yeah, I wonder how it gets around Halloween. Imagine if someone throws like a big party out there.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's a wrap then.
I know. I'm glad to be back. I was like, how do I talk?
I know. I said that right when we started. I'm like, I'll see if I know how to record, how to
Yeah.
read. I felt like I stumbled so much. I wasn't in my groove, I guess. Like after we record several episodes, we get into this groove. And when we take a break, we're like, how do we do this?
Yeah. So if you have any stories, send them to us at somethingominouspod@gmail.com and we will include them in our next episode.
Don't forget to rate our podcast if you love us.
And follow us on all of our social media.
Instagram is Something Ominous Podcast. TikTok is Something Ominous. And YouTube is Something Ominous. See you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.